It is early morning, late autumn, 1923. A pale sun rises over a field outside a small town in northern Iowa. The ground is hard with frost. Corn stalks stand broken and dry, their harvest finished weeks earlier by hand and by machine. A wind moves steadily across the land, unbroken by buildings taller than a grain elevator a mile away. Smoke lifts from the chimney of a farmhouse, thin and gray against the sky. Inside, a kitchen stove has been burning since before dawn. Coffee boils. Bread warms, boots dry near the door, still caked with yesterday's mud. There is no sound of traffic, no radio playing music. Only the creak of a windmill turning and the distant lowing of cattle waiting to be fed. Scenes like this are not exceptional in the rural United States of the 1920s. They are the ordinary backdrop of life for millions of Americans whose days begin before sunrise and end long after dark. Beyond the fields and fences, beyond the dirt roads leading into town, a nation is changing rapidly. Yet here in places far from cities and factories, life continues at a slower pace, shaped by land, weather, labor, and long-standing custom, even as the forces of a new century press steadily inward. In the years following the First World War, the United States emerges as an industrial and financial power. Factories in cities expand. Electric lights brighten streets. Automobiles multiply along paved roads. Newspapers speak of prosperity, modernity, and progress. But rural America enters the decade under strain. During the war, farmers had been urged to increase production to feed American troops and European allies. Prices rose. Land values climbed. Many farmers borrowed heavily to buy more acreage, more livestock, and new machinery. When the war ends in 1918, global demand collapses. By 1920, crop prices fall sharply. Wheat, corn, cotton, and hogs bring far less at market than they had just a few years earlier. This sudden shift leaves rural families exposed. Farm income drops even as debts remain fixed. Mortgages come due. Banks themselves under pressure tighten credit. In many counties across the Midwest and South, foreclosures increase throughout the early 1920s. The national economy may appear strong on paper, but in the countryside, hardship is already a daily reality. The rhythm of rural life remains tied to planting and harvest, yet the margin between survival and failure narrows with each season. Work in rural America during this period is labor-intensive and relentless. On small and medium farms, families provide most of the labor themselves. Men, women, and children rise early and work long hours. Tasks change with the seasons but never fully cease. In spring, fields are plowed, often with teams of horses or mules, though tractors are becoming more common among those who can afford them. Planting follows, then weeks of cultivation to control weeds. Summer brings haying, fence repair, and constant attention to livestock. Autumn is dominated by harvest. Winter, though quieter, involves equipment maintenance, wood cutting, and animal care. Despite the growing presence of machinery, much of the work remains physical. Tractors in the early 1920s are expensive, heavy, and unreliable by modern standards. They require fuel, repairs, and mechanical knowledge. Many farmers continue to rely on animal power well into the decade. Even where machines are used, they rarely eliminate labor entirely. Instead, they change its nature, concentrating work into shorter, more intense periods and increasing dependence on purchased equipment and fuel. Inside rural homes, daily life reflects both continuity and constraint. Most farmhouses lack indoor plumbing. Water is drawn from wells by hand or windmill. Bathing occurs infrequently, often using heated water carried into tubs. Outhouses remain standard. Electricity is rare outside towns. In 1920, fewer than 10% of American farms have electric service. Kerosene lamps provide light. Wood or coal stoves supply heat and serve as the primary cooking surface. In winter, rooms are kept warm only where families gather. Bedrooms may be unheated. Women's labor is central to rural survival. In addition to household tasks such as cooking, cleaning, sewing, and childcare, many women tend gardens, preserve food, raise poultry, and assist with fieldwork during busy seasons. Canning is widespread. Fruits, vegetables, and meats are preserved in glass jars to carry families through winter months. Butter and cheese are made at home or sold locally. Eggs provide a modest but vital source of cash, often controlled by women and used to purchase necessities. Children's lives are shaped by work as much as by schooling. In rural areas, attendance at school is seasonal and irregular. One-room schoolhouses serve scattered populations. A single teacher instructs students of multiple ages, often with limited resources. During planting and harvest, children may be kept home to help. Education is valued, but immediate labor needs often take precedence. For many, formal schooling ends after the 8th grade. Isolation is a defining feature of rural existence. Farms are spread miles apart. Roads are often unpaved and impassable in bad weather. Travel to town may take hours by wagon or increasingly by automobile. The arrival of cars does change rural mobility during the 1920s, but unevenly. While car ownership rises nationwide, rural families face challenges of cost, maintenance, and road conditions. Still, automobiles reduce isolation, allowing greater access to markets, churches, and social events. They also expose rural residents to urban influences, fashions, and ideas, gradually altering expectations and aspirations. Communication remains limited. Telephones are present in some rural areas, often through party lines shared among several households. Conversations are public by necessity. Radios, which become more common in the latter half of the decade, are initially rare on farms due to lack of electricity. Battery-powered sets exist but are expensive and cumbersome. Where radios do appear, they bring news, music, and national culture into homes that had long been oriented inward, toward family and locality. Social life in rural America is rooted in institutions that predate the decade. Churches serve as spiritual centers and community hubs. Sunday services, revivals, and church suppers provide regular opportunities for gathering. Religious affiliation varies by region, with Protestant denominations dominant in most rural areas, though Catholic communities are present in parts of the Midwest and Southwest. Faith shapes moral expectations and daily conduct, reinforcing traditions and social boundaries. Fraternal organizations, farm bureaus, and cooperative associations also play important roles. Groups such as the Grange Advocate for Farmers' Interests promote education and provide social outlets. Cooperative grain elevators and creameries offer some protection against market volatility, though their reach is limited. County fairs remain important events, showcasing livestock, crops, and domestic skills while reinforcing local identity. Racial divisions are stark and consequential. In the rural South, African American farmers, many of them tenant farmers or sharecroppers, face systemic discrimination, economic exploitation, and violence. The sharecropping system binds families to land they do not own, with debts that often grow rather than diminish. Access to education, credit, and legal protection is severely restricted. Lynching and intimidation enforce racial hierarchy. These realities shape every aspect of life, from labor arrangements to mobility and safety. In other regions, indigenous communities continue to experience displacement and poverty, confined to reservations or marginal lands under federal oversight. Federal policies during this period emphasize assimilation, with boarding schools and restrictions on traditional practices. Rural America is not a uniform experience. It is fractured along lines of race, ethnicity, and power. Immigrant communities also shape rural landscapes. In the Midwest, German, Scandinavian, and Eastern European farmers maintain cultural traditions while adapting to American conditions. In California and the Southwest, Mexican and Asian laborers work in agriculture under harsh conditions, often excluded from land ownership and citizenship rights. The 1920s see rising nativism nationwide, reflected in restrictive immigration laws such as the Immigration Act of 1924. These policies reinforce a narrow definition of who belongs, even as immigrant labor remains essential to rural economies. Health and medicine in rural areas lag behind urban advances. Doctors are scarce. Hospitals are distant. Many births occur at home, attended by midwives or family members. Infectious diseases such as influenza, tuberculosis, and diphtheria remain threats. The memory of the 1918 influenza pandemic is still fresh, particularly in isolated communities where medical help arrived late or not at all. Sanitation is basic. Clean water is not guaranteed. Life expectancy in rural areas is lower than in cities, and accidents involving farm machinery are common. Weather exerts constant influence. Droughts, floods, and early frosts can devastate crops. In the Great Plains, cycles of dry years contribute to soil exhaustion, a problem not yet fully recognized or addressed. Farmers respond by plowing more land, increasing production in an effort to compensate for low prices, inadvertently worsening long-term vulnerability. The seeds of future environmental disaster are being sown quietly during this decade. Government presence in rural life is limited but growing. County agents from the Department of Agriculture promote scientific farming methods, soil conservation, and crop diversification. Extension services offer demonstrations and advice. Adoption varies. Some farmers welcome new techniques, others distrust outside intervention. Federal power remains distant, mediated through local institutions and personal relationships. Politically, rural America exerts significant influence. Many national leaders court the farm vote, though policy responses often fall short of farmers' needs. Debates over tariffs, credit, and price supports intensify. The McNary, Hodgen Farm relief bills, introduced in the mid-1920s, seek to stabilize prices by having the federal government purchase surplus crops. Though they gain support among farmers, they face opposition and are ultimately vetoed by President Calvin Coolidge. The sense that rural concerns are overlooked deepens. Culturally, rural life is often portrayed by urban media as backward or quaint. This portrayal contributes to a growing divide between city and countryside. Young people in particular feel the pull of cities, where wages are higher and social life appears freer. Throughout the decade, rural-to-urban migration continues. Small towns lose population. Farms are consolidated or abandoned. Those who remain tend to be older or more deeply tied to land and tradition. Yet departure is not universal. Many rural families persist through attachment, necessity, or lack of alternatives. Land represents identity as much as livelihood. Ownership, even under debt, carries meaning. For tenants and sharecroppers, options are fewer. Mobility is constrained by poverty and discrimination. The promise of the decade, so often celebrated in popular memory, is unevenly distributed and carefully bounded. By the latter half of the 1920s, signs of strain accumulate. Bank failures increase in rural areas. Between 1921 and 1929, thousands of small banks, many serving agricultural communities, close their doors. Savings vanish. Credit dries up further. These failures rarely make national headlines, but their impact is immediate and personal. Families lose deposits accumulated over years. Trust in institutions erodes. At the same time, technological and cultural changes continue to press in. Chain stores begin to appear in small towns, undercutting local merchants. Mail-order catalogs bring consumer goods directly to farmhouses, altering purchasing habits. Movies reach rural audiences through traveling theaters or occasional trips to town. The influence of national culture grows, even where daily routines remain largely unchanged. By 1929, the rural United States stands at a crossroads. The decade has not delivered the widespread prosperity promised by its reputation. Instead, it has exposed deep vulnerabilities while reshaping expectations. When the stock market collapses in October of that year, rural America is already weakened. For many farmers, the Great Depression does not begin with a crash on Wall Street. It arrives as a continuation of hardship, now intensified and prolonged. What life was really like in rural America in the 1920s is found not in slogans or celebrations, but in the steady accumulation of days marked by labor, uncertainty, and endurance. It is a history written in fields worked before dawn, in kitchens warmed by stoves, in debts carried season after season, and in communities bound together by necessity as much as by choice. As the decade closes, these realities will shape how rural Americans confront the crises soon to come, carrying forward patterns of resilience and strain that will define the years ahead.